armies of different sizes and military strengths, varied advantages and disadvantages in terms of geographical space. Countries of differing levels of leadership acumen, and they all fell to Assyria. And all these fallen nations believed in their own gods, though their gods were man-made. They believed in these gods to deliver them. And they discovered after being defeated that their gods were powerless to do so. Now Hezekiah, the 13th king of Judah, holds in his hands an arrogant letter from King Sennacherib. He is king of Assyria. And essentially the message is really to convey one thought. All the others we have defeated, and Judah, we're now coming for you. When we saturate your land, we're going to imprison your people, we're going to destroy your belief systems, we're going to exercise our willpower over you, and our track record proves that you ought to carry very serious concern. Mount Ararat, what would you think would be Hezekiah's response? When he reads this letter, is it that he gives way and surrenders to instant anxiety? Maybe his emotions become frozen. He's unable to choose an intelligible response. Does he surrender and submit to instant panic and frenzy in terms of considerations, knowing that whatever he might consider given Assyria's record, none of it will work? What would you surmise would be Hezekiah's response? I only start the sermon this way because in my estimation, you can tell an awful lot about a person's deepest beliefs and their most entrenched confidences when you get a chance to observe their first response to bad news. When you observe their first response to bone-chilling, step-freezing, lose-your-breath threats like Hezekiah reads in this letter. Well, much to my surprise, Hezekiah takes the letter. He does not surrender to anxiety. He doesn't submit to panic. He doesn't give way to weird and twisted thoughts. Y'all know what he did? He went to church. And when he got there, he lays the letter out before God. One scholar says the best way you can image it is to imagine Hezekiah like a child who runs into the presence of their parents with a toy that has just been broken. And when that child gives that toy to the parent, they are doing so because they believe parents can do anything. And that child brings the toy to his parent expecting that it's going to be fixed. Well, this is Hezekiah's posture because, make no mistake about it, he believes in God. He carries some real deep convictions that are evident in his reaction to the letter he has just received. He knows the beliefs people carried for the gods of the countries that fell to Assyria. And he knows those gods were man-made. They were wood-carved expressions of the countries that created them. And Hezekiah balances that against the God to whom he now lays out this threatening letter. And he knows he is convicted. He lives with this deep conviction. He knows that these other countries may have fallen to Assyria because their man-made wood-carved gods could not deliver them. But he's praying to the living God, the only God who is true, powerful, and almighty. Hezekiah knows this. And it prompts him in this scary time against the backdrop of serious threat when other options certainly are available. But none of the other options are stronger than this one. It's a statement of his faith. It testifies to the depth of his belief, and it clearly lets you know where the king stands. Hezekiah believes in God. He trusts him in threatening circumstances, and it's his first response to bad news. He runs to church, lays the letter out before God, and utters a word of prayer. And while he knows, like you and I do, that God reserves the right to answer our prayers however he wants to, he prays believing that God will answer it in the way he has requested. In fact, I'm not making it up. Listen to the prayer again. But let me read it to you out of the Message translation. Hezekiah says, God of Israel, seated in majesty on the cherubim throne. You are the one and only God, sovereign of all kingdoms on earth, maker of heaven and maker of earth. Open your ears, God, and listen. Open your eyes and look. Look at this letter Sennacherib has sent, a brazen insult to the living God. The facts are true, O God. The kings of Assyria have laid waste countries and kingdoms, huge bonfires they made of their gods. They are no gods, handmade from wood and stone. But now, O God, our God, save us from raw Assyrian power and make all the kingdoms on earth know that you are God, the one and the only God. Mount Ararat, this is the message that I simply want to convey to us this weekend. This text and others clearly teach that prayer is, by definition, casting our wills before God. If you ask me what prayer is, that's the definition of prayer. It is to cast your will before God, just to converse with God about what your will is, whatever imaginations you have, to talk to God about it, not always audibly, sometimes mentally, subliminally. It is to cast our wills to God. Prayer is a statement of faith that my confidence is in God no matter what. It's the intervention that addresses fear and anxiety. All of these are fact. These are true. But I also want to argue and add to our conversation this weekend that prayer is also the offering I give to God because I believe prayer makes a difference and creates change. I want to argue that prayer is not just an exercise in eloquence. Prayer is not just the duty and discipline of the disciple. But I pray because I believe that when I cast my will before God and God hears my prayers, God answers my prayers and he creates change. I believe prayer changes what appears inevitable. I believe prayer defies what appears evident. I believe prayer challenges what appears obvious and offers alternatives when there appear to be none. Prayer reserves options that only faith in its very discipline can make to us available. Prayer creates change. Casting my will onto his strength, believing that he hears my expressions, that he cares about my concerns. It's taking everything in your mind, everything on your heart, and setting it before your God, releasing outcome and deliberation and consideration and determination to God. I may not know how he's going to answer, but I'm going to talk to him because I know he will. And I know that however God decides to respond to my prayer is what is best for me. And I also believe that there is never no response to my prayers. Whenever I pray, God always responds because no prayer goes unanswered, even if some are delayed. No prayer goes unanswered, even if they're not answered like I have articulated. Late great English writer, journalist, philosopher, poet, biographer, Christian apologetic theologian Gilbert Keith Chesterton. Several other literary figures were seated around table one night amidst a larger gathering, and the question was asked to them, if on a stranded desert island you could only have one book, what book would you prefer? Well, one writer without hesitation said, if I was stranded on that island, I want the complete works of William Shakespeare. You know, in every crowd, Mount Ararat, there's always the person who, even if they're not real holy, they act like they are. So somebody's always going to try to act so lofty and holy. Next person said, if I was on that desert island and I could only have one book, I want the Bible. Well, Chesterton was the theologian among the crowd. You would have expected him perhaps to say that. But when they asked him, one book on a desert island, stranded, can't get off, which book would you prefer? He said, well, I suppose I would choose Thomas's Guide to Practical Shipbuilding. Do y'all get it? Because in this instance, he's right. He needed specific instruction. And he knew if you on a desert island, it's too late for you to have a Bible in your hand trying to learn the content therein. You got to have the substance of the Bible already in your heart so you can pray that the Lord would get you off that island. God doesn't have to answer my prayers in the manner that I request, but I do have to believe that praying can create the change I need. This is what I'm pushing for us to consider this week in Mount Ararat. Do you believe that God is even stirred by your prayers? Do you believe that God is moved by your prayers? Do you believe that God responds to your prayers? And the answer I know is an emphatic yes. You can trust that he does. This is not an exercise that simply becomes our gathered therapy free of charge between 10:30 and 12:15 every single week. You ain't here for therapy. You are here to shore up your theology and to know that because I love God, I know he hears and he answers prayer. And when he answers, he brings radical change. Your ultimate position as a Christian is tested by the character of your prayer life. Don't tell me how deep you are as a Christian carrying lightweight prayers. If you're a deep Christian, you got some deep weight prayers. Don't tell me how much you know and to what you have been exposed and your life's experiences. If any of those make you too smart to pray or make you delay your prayers, if you so smart that you got to consider everything else but praying, you ain't that smart. You've got to pray because it ought to be the response you have to terrible anticipations. It ought to be what you do when you're facing what scares you and threatens you. Pray because it does take the care of something off of your emotionality and cast it on the Lord, knowing that the Lord cares for you. You pray because it does give you a chance to literally turn it over to the Lord and let him work it out. And this text teaches that you also pray because you believe prayer creates change. Say it with me. I believe prayer creates change. And if it can create change when the challenge and threat and the concern is Assyrian size or Assyrian arrogant, then you've got to also believe it'll work for everything in your life that needs change, no matter what it is. I'm not arguing this weekend the value of prayer. I'm not sermonically trying to defend the reality of prayer. I'm encouraging that you develop confidence in your prayers. I'm not trying to get you to believe in the discipline of prayer. I'm not trying to get you to simply commit to the exercise of prayer. I'm trying to get you to have so much confidence in your prayers that you'd rather pray than do anything else. You must believe that prayer anchors your confidence in God, the God who can act and intervene and overturn and insert his will and exercise authority and flex his muscle sovereignty and demonstrate his might. You pray because you expect change. Whatever changes you're trying to make, whatever hurt you're trying to get over, whatever answers you need, whatever door you're hoping will open, whatever threat you are about to face, whatever life adjustment is being forced upon you, I don't care the size of the arrogance or the threat of it. I don't care the content of its threat in your life. You go to your closet and pray about it, and I guarantee you God creates change. Like Hezekiah, you lay it out before the Lord so he can change it. And I preach this because I don't want you watering prayer down to an exercise in express and demonstrated articulation, but absent any spiritual expectation that God will change things according to what you have prayed. Pray in your life because prayer changes things.